let's welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk Business, organized by JCI European Senate. I'm Filipe Carrera.
And my name is Robbert van Waart.
The Dutch guy.
Yes.
Welcoming Wayne Clarke today, founder of the World Class Manager Program, who have now developed this is a big number, 20,000 managers globally. Previously led the Sunday Times consulting business and has worked with again, a big number, 700 CEOs in more than 30 countries, JCI Ambassador, and a lifelong JCI fan. So welcome, Wayne. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. First question that I will put you. Tell us, what are the skills needed to be a manager in this post, we hope, COVID era?
That's a great question. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here and also to share with any of you that have tuned in into the stream, to the live stream. Again, what I'd like to do, as we always try to do, is to share some super practical things, both from our insights and also things that we can all do to improve the performance of our teams and our organizations. And I think it's a great question, Filipe, because the last year has taught us a lot about how organizations get the very best from people. And we start with the idea that the goal of all of this, of course, is to improve the way that managers manage, to improve the performance of the team. Of course, if we get that right, then we improve the performance of the organization. And ultimately, the job of improving the organization is to deliver better for the customers. So we always try and keep the customer element in mind. And I think a lot of organizations over the last year have had to refigure out really what their purpose is, how they're structured, what their strategy needs to be, because in some cases, entire business models are now no longer valid. Some business models have now come into existence that didn't exist this time last year, and it's created a whole different, I guess, dynamic for how managers must manage their people. There are two things, though, that I think I would focus in on. One is the attention span of people. Now, we've been doing a lot of work of looking at this over the last few months, and depending on what research you look at, there's one piece of research which is quite interesting from, it was on the BBC, and they said that human beings now have an attention span 1 second shorter than a goldfish. Right. So the really worrying thing.
How long is that? Is that like blood?
It's like 7-8 seconds or something. It's really short. So they say goldfish is like 9 seconds. Human being now around 8 seconds. And the interesting thing is that if you look at human evolution, obviously, depending on your views on human evolution, we've been around for a long time. They think the drop off in the attention span has actually happened in the last 5 years, more dramatically. So it's like a hockey stick of attention loss or going down.
So last year, with all the online and all the digital stimulus, is even worse. It's
even worse. So now imagine the problem, right? Let's say, so Filipe, you are the CEO. Let's say Robbert is the manager, and then I am the new guy. I'm the most junior guy in the company. You as a CEO,
good hierarchy. I like it.
Yeah, you like. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. I thought you'd like it. It plays to everything that's important. So you as a CEO, you've got a strategic message to get through. The manager to me, the most junior guy in the company. Now I'm now in a remote location. I've been working from home for the last 12 months. Think about how many things are trying to get my attention. So before, when I was in the office, there was things competing for my attention that were digital, that were social media driven. Now imagine I'm at home and I've got, TikTok and WhatsApp and Snapchat and Facebook and LinkedIn. And the dog and all the other things that are going on. All of these things are trying to get my attention. And we know through looking at the rise in the value of cryptos like Dogecoin and SafeMoon and all the others that have really been on this big trajectory, the reason why they've become so valuable is because they've tapped into the value of attention. Attention is the most valuable thing right now, which is being traded in a digital space. So the reason why I think this is so important for the manager, for the modern manager in June 2021, is because the manager and the CEO want to get my attention on what they want my attention on, which is the business, the customer, the operation, whatever it is. All of these very wealthy individuals over this side, from Mr. Snapchat, Mr. Facebook, Mrs. TikTok, they are all trying to get my attention, and they are backed by way more wealthy people and probably generate way more sexy content that's likely to get my attention more than you as the organization are going to get my attention.
Mm.
So, we think it was always difficult for a manager, but now imagine I'm fighting against these other competing factions for attention. That's the first one. And then the second one is time. And I think, everyone always reports time as a problem. We found an article which was written in 1974, and it was Harvard Business Review's most secondly downloaded article of all time. And it's an article which is about time management. Ironically, the fact that it's so old. And if you look at the language in there and you look at the structure and the problem it sets up to solve, it could have been written in June 2021, because the time problem is the big problem. So again, for the modern manager in June 2021, you've got to really think about how much time do people have and how much attention span do they have. I think there's two really important elements of this. And then you can pile in so many other things, from health and well-being to the anxiety of what's going on with COVID. And I think the job of the modern manager is more complex than ever. So I think that's, and I think any CEOs and leaders, if you've got managers who you manage, I think our challenge now as a leader is to become very sympathetic to the challenge of being a manager at this time. I think it's the most difficult time to ever probably be a manager in an organization, is my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I understand that. Wow, yeah. 5 seconds, you said. Oh. This
8.
There was a joke about men that they are always thinking about something else every 6 seconds. Now is even worse.
Football.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. So how? And you said also that a lot of businesses change and or did go away all the way last year, because everything went digital. And you're in an your program, the World Class Manager program, is I know partly digital, partly online, etc. But I think as well you had to cope a lot with the attention and the time challenge last year as well. How did you and your company cope with it that last year? Did you change your model? Did your customers change? Did they go away? Did they just arrive? Or how did it went for you?
I'm quite dramatic. Probably my team would say too dramatic sometimes. Is that within the first few days of COVID and lockdown, I was working in Canada and I came back like maybe 3 days before we went into lockdown in the UK. But as soon as we went into lockdown, I sort of, we have two halves of our business. Half is a traditional consulting face-to-face business. The other is digital online. And I sort of made this thing to the team of saying, look, the face-to-face business is now dead. And they say, what do you mean it's dead? I said, it's dead. Forget it. It's over. It's finished. Because I think I was reacting probably a bit too much. But I thought, what we now need to do is accept that things have changed really quickly and pivot everything to the online business and put all of our attention there. And then we took a very difficult decision we were going to develop the second wave of our program, which we launched actually about 6 weeks ago, called World Class Manager Series 2. And it was a very big decision for us because, you think in a time of economic difficulty and uncertainty, the smart thing to do is hold on to cash. We're lucky we don't have investors, but we took a really big decision to invest in the development of our second wave of programming, not really because of necessary demand from clients, but we believed it was the right step to take. But it was a real leap of faith. So what we tried to do was, I guess, believe in what our product is and what we do. We'd always had good feedback from clients, but we thought, well, let's plow into that and see if we can develop the business even further.
So is it also a competence or how do you say it? Not maybe a talent, but something you really have to do is always, or not always, but especially in these times, also go through the wall of fear or take your leap of faith, or how do you want to call it? Go forward instead of, the fight, flight, and freeze as also a manager, leader of a company, of your business owner. Yeah.
Well, I realized like a few years ago that when, we work with so many different CEOs in companies, and you realize that often, as you guys do, you see the leadership team create the vision and the strategy and they make it up. And this is the thing I always tell, like I lecture at a few universities, and I always tell undergraduates, the thing about when you see an organization's vision, and I always say, I'm sorry to sort of kill the mystery around it. Everyone makes it up, right? Unless you're a psychic and you've got psychic ability, no one knows what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. let alone 3 to 5 years. We believe that something might occur. We create a vision, and we then appear to the staff confident. It looks like it makes sense.
This is the thing. Wow.
People start to believe it, and it becomes the reality. So, I kind of figured, having seen this so many times, what this is about is you've got to have a vision that inspires you. And if it does, then that's enough, and you just keep working towards it. And I think that's the thing. Like, we often go into companies and say, look, if the vision, when you describe it, doesn't excite you about what tomorrow looks like, this is a lousy vision. You've got to recreate this thing, because the vision should offer hope. And the thing that we realized in the last 12 months is that people are in more need of hope than ever before. I don't know how it happened in Netherlands. And, here we had, like, I'm sure it's the same, we had 3 waves of lockdowns, and each wave got progressively more destructive to people's hope. I think the third one, everyone here said the same. It felt like the most difficult one that got announced in early January. And, that's on a sort of, that's in a community level. Imagine inside organizations. So we've got to keep people's hope alive. And I think having an exciting vision for what tomorrow looks like is probably one of the most effective ways, again, back to the first question of what a modern manager should be able to do if they're a really great leader or great manager, is you've got to excite people about tomorrow in the hope that it then translates into action today. And it's the same when, as we're all huge JCI fans and been involved for so long, the wonderful thing about JCI is it exists around a core vision that, even if you were as upset and tired and poor as you might be, you can't fail to be excited about the vision and the mission of and the creed of the organization. It gives you an energy again, and that's a great vision, right? So, I think that's what we would definitely suggest to leaders they need to do, is create those compelling visions that excite people.
Wayne, don't you think that I saw, and you talked with a lot of managers, and I saw a lot of conferences where there was always a speaker that would say, oh, before the pandemic, we live in a VUCA world. And everybody in the room would be like, yeah, VUCA. And they were like, yes, of course, this is like very ambiguous, very variable. Of course, this change. But were managers prepared for a VUCA event that was a pandemic?
Well, like the funny thing with VUCA is it was the biggest nonsense, I think, because, the truth is, you take a microscope, as we understand in science, and the closer you zoom in to a molecule or an atom, and you realize that at every single point in time, everything's changing constantly. The illusion is that there isn't change is the biggest lie. The fact is, everything changes all the time, and it has done, and it will do forever.
The world is flat. The world is flat. That's not a lie, right?
It's not a lie. Don't fall off. Yeah, it's so we understand that everything changes, and I think the weird illusion in organizations is that there is some sort of sense of stability. I think that the amazing thing of the last year is it's really shaken everyone again to realize that actually everything is up for change, and the illusion that everything will stay the same is really the big lie. So I think what it's done is, in many organizations, is it's caused people to rethink what the future might look like. And I think this is a positive in many cases. And the reason why I say that is because we worked with a company at the beginning of lockdown last year where they said the typical thing, they wanted our help in designing these sessions for leaders to train the top 100 of the organization, blah, blah, similar story. Which, of course, is a great, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, it makes sense. However, before March 2020, the junior people in the organization believed that the leadership team had a better idea of what was going to happen in the future than they did. Because the leadership team always come around and say, this is what's going to happen next. And everyone says, oh, okay, makes sense.
They didn't know either.
They had no idea. After March 2020, everyone accepts that no one's got a clue. So if you're really smart as a CEO, you start to think, okay, if no one does have a clue, then the hierarchy doesn't make any sense anymore. What makes sense is there must be between 10 to 20% of every population we come across in every organization who really cares about this organization and has given it some thought. They've thought about what the customer really wants. And those 20% are not in the leadership team. That's 20% as a cross-section, whichever way you cut your organization. They could be anywhere. So maybe a clever thing to do is to start to say, actually, VUCA is true, and it's always been true, and it will always be true forever. Let's find out the 5, 10, 20% of the population who really give this some considered thought and have got some good ideas that can change things for us in a positive way, and engage with those people. So I think the clever organizations, and we found a few of them that have really embraced this and said, let's look for those, people who really care. Just a quick trivia question for you, right? So we met a guy who's a cardiologist, and he's been studying men who've had heart attacks for the last number of years. And he's been looking at the changes in behavior of men who've had heart attacks. So he asked me the question, so I'll ask you and see what you think. He said, out of 100 men following a heart attack, what percentage of men change their behavior, i.e. will exercise more, eat a bit more healthy? Out of 100 men, how many will change their behavior following a heart attack?
Very, very low percentage. I would say 10%.
2%.
Oh no, it's a bit higher. It's 21. In his observation, 21%. And the point was, he was saying, look, even following such a life-changing moment, to get people to change their behavior is so difficult. And I think, in the organizations we probably all work with, everyone throws around this statement like it's easy. They talk about behavior change. We're going to change people's behavior. Think, well, it's not that straightforward. However, we do know that there is a population of people, probably below 20%, who are really willing to engage, to change, to do things differently, to embrace the VUCA-ness of the universe and do something
because
positive.
Change is pain, always.
Of course. Of course.
You have to be prepared to endure the pain of change.
Yeah.
And the period of that endurance can be very long.
Yeah.
Especially when we only look at the end result, that the end result is a total different behavior.
Yeah.
We forget to look at the very small steps you make, instead of don't put mayo in there. In the Netherlands, you put mayonnaise on your chips, or don't put mayonnaise anymore, but do it ketchup. But ketchup is still very bad, but it's less bad than. And when we say we only look at when we stop with the chips or the French fries. How do you call them? So.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, is that a lot of organizations give up way too early.
Yeah.
So especially if they're like, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a listed company problem, but I think if you're in a stock market listed company and you work to the rhythm of the 3-month reporting to the market, to the analysts, and you work on this quarterly basis, we find so many organizations who will say, we have this change program and, we want it to make an impact in the next quarter, or maybe next 2 quarters. And you say, you serious? Like any of the organizations that we found, I'm sure you would see the same. You're probably talking 3 to 5 years for real change to happen, because you need the refresh of employees who change their behavior, coming in a different way.
So Wayne, when you let's fast forward 5 years.
Yeah.
And so in retrospect, so we look back, what is your wish that we as a society or as leaders have learned because of this pandemic and this 1.5 years of strange situation? What is your wish? What would you wish?
That's a great question. It's a really great question. And maybe there's some contentious views with this too, right? So a couple of things. I think one is, for organizations, we talk about like waste a lot. And I think organizations wastes, and I'm not talking about like, an ESG type of waste situation. I'm talking more about like knowledge. I think it's one of the biggest wastes in organizations we come across, and organizations replicate the same problems over and over and over again. If you rewind back, I'm showing my age now, I'm 45, but when I go back to, I began at Deloitte when I was straight out of university, 1998. And when I began there, I was given a book by my boss at the time, and it was called The Knowing Doing Gap. And it was this promise of the knowledge management era. This was the big promise of the late 90s in corporate, that it was going to solve all these issues. And actually the fundamentals of knowledge management was so brilliant, because the idea is essentially helping to make sure that we're constantly learning. We become a learning organization. How many organizations became learning organizations? Not many. And I think it's a really big source of waste. And I think and there's a few impacts of that. People in all organizations have got a gift to bring. And I think, what I've seen on the positive end in the last year is organizations who've re-engaged with their people and accepted that people have got very diverse gifts and talents. And it's not reliant on hierarchy. It's not reliant on years of service. And there's a rethink about how to help the human being to fulfill potential in a more positive way. And I think I would love to see that trend continue, and that the workplace becomes a place, and it sounds like a nirvana dream, but you did say 5-year wish. It becomes a place where, you know, people genuinely start to feel like the work, like in order to work in a workplace that doesn't harness your talents and skills, becomes as socially unacceptable as smoking in the offices today. Yeah. You know, we want to get rid of these companies. Like, in a way, the odd thing is that we have these lists, and I participated in this for years. We create these lists of these best employers to work for, like they're an exception to the rule, which is quite strange.
Standard.
Yeah, we want that to be the standard. Like, you know, if you apply that to poverty, you know, you would want everyone in the world, and in theory it's possible, everyone in the world should be able to live at least the minimum of like a middle class existence. The money's there, the resources are there, but you know, things go wrong. So from a work point of view, I think that would be really powerful if that could happen.
To have more, is it maybe in other words, but to have more is it more that sort of a more human workplace, or is it?
Yeah, it is more human. Yeah. And yeah, for people to be more fulfilled. Like we look at one of the questions we always ask managers and leaders, we'll say, you know, when in your life did you have that, we call it that conversation, not talking about like the birds and the bees, but, you know, more about when did you have that conversation about your hopes, dreams and ambitions with someone. And you know, we find with, you know, most people are, it's not that common that you would have that experience. If you're lucky and you've had a mom or a dad or both of them, or someone in your life who's been interested enough to have a really in-depth conversation with you about your dreams and your future, I think you're in the minority of the population. You know,
work is not work anymore, huh?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. However, there are always going to be jobs that people don't want to do, that need to be done. So it's not maybe that perfect nirvana, but I think that's one important one.
And by the way, let's pick up on something that you said that is very important, and you are also in training, and also you have to deal with the managers. We were talking about attention span. So advices that you can give how to engage a team, especially in this virtual world, how you can basically engage that team.
Well, I think Agile was a great promise, right? Agile came along and everyone loved the idea of working in an Agile way. I think if you've got the discipline, as Robbert talked about, I think, and you mentioned, I think the discipline is key. That can really make a difference. However, in many organizations I've seen, Agile becomes a way overused word, and it just means do everything all the time. And now I'm even more stressed out than I was before. And this Agile was meant to solve a big problem for us. So I think the number one important lesson I've learned along the journey is we got to see this guy, Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great a few years ago. And one of the things he said to the audience was, in his observation of looking at some of the best CEOs he's come across, they seem to spend more time than the average CEO about thinking, of spending some time in the week where they stop and they think about what's actually going on. They become consciously aware of what's happening in their team and for the organization. And it's a great method of being able to slow down thinking, slow down time, decrease stress, and become, you know, more cognizant of what's happening. So one of his sort of message to the audience was you should be spending about 10 to 20% a week as a leader doing that. So one of the guys in the group put his hand up and said, you know, sounds great, but pretty stupid. You know, do you really think I can take between half a day to a day, a week to not do anything in my company? And then the guy said, another thing, it was a great response. He said to him, could you take a week off of holiday in June? And he's like, no. He says, why not? He said, because I'm busy. He said, okay. Could you take a week off of holiday in November? He says, yes. He says, how come? He says, because I'm less busy in November. He says, okay. So maybe what you can do is put in your diary half a day a week, 2 hours a week, starting in November. And I guarantee you, by the time November comes around, it will be a lot easier to create that space in your diary. And I think it was such an important message because as busy, successful people, what you try to do in the time problem, which is the problem for most teams, is they always have a perception there's no time available. Because you can't solve the time problem this week or this month because there's no space in the diary, your immediate emotion is it can't be solved. And that actually increases more anxiety. Whereas believing that what you could do is you could start to save some more time and create that space starting in September or October, maybe when your diary looks a little better. And I think that's a really important thing that you can start to do, because creating the space and time to think will definitely change your ability to concentrate on these important tasks. It's when you've got no time and availability that you often then believe that you're multitasking. And the one thing many people talk about is the idea of multitasking is again a total lie. You can't multitask. You always have to do one thing at once. The idea of chopping up the processing availability of your brain to do multiple things at once means that you probably perform worse on many things rather than performing well on many things. So I think, what you can do, my cousin is a great guy who runs an organization called Sport and Thought, and he works with young adolescents and helps them through really significant problems. He uses a very similar analogy with young people and talks about when you play, and he uses football as a method to work with children. And he says, if you look at a great footballer, that moment where they put their foot on the ball, and the foot on the ball might be 1 to 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds, it gives you the ability to span the entire field of play and make the right next move. And it's the same thing, I think, for busy modern managers and people in teams, is they don't create any space and time to think. It's constant, constant, constant. And the strange thing is that we reward that in our social system. Like if you go back into the office and you see someone in the lift, you're going up to sit at your desk and someone says to you, how are you doing? And you say, oh, I'm crazy busy, right? That's often rewarded because in the social culture of our organizations, we say, yeah, me too. I'm crazy. Yeah, you're really cool.
It's like the person that has the desk full of paper.
It's exactly the same. If you got into the lift and someone said to you, oh, what did your day look like? And you say, well, today I'm just thinking. You say, this guy's lost his mind. He's gone nuts. But we don't reward that in our social system. But this is probably, we know from looking at some of the best CEOs we've come across, the most successful, richest people I've met on the planet, build in this ability to think. And that's why they've become so successful.
Yeah, great. Wayne, we share our passion also, not only about leadership and business, but also for JCI, right?
Of course.
You haven't been a JCI member, right? But you are a JCI ambassador. So a lifelong global partner of JCI, right?
Yeah.
Believing the creed and
I love it. I love it.
And we said before the show already, the first time we met, I believe, was in Osaka 2010. So it's already, and you have been to all those many conferences and global partnership summits. So you have seen a lot of JCI members, which are also business leaders, entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, small, medium enterprise leaders, managers, etc. And you've seen them also grow, etc. And that learning environment of JCI, what have you seen is the biggest possibility for maybe potential JCI members or future JCI members? What is the biggest learning you have seen people making there?
Well, there's so many.
Which are really interesting also for business life.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this. I think there's the business side of it. And I don't think, and this is part of our eternal challenge, isn't it? To convince more and more companies to engage with JCI. Because, what appealed to me when I first met JCI, 11, 12 years ago, was an organization where in many companies we go into, we're trying to force people to learn and grow and develop. Here I come across a group of JCI members in Reading in England on a Saturday afternoon that paid their own money to come and develop themselves, which is like, what? This is crazy. And for me, it was like a sort of shot in the arm of energy and engagement here, finding these people in JCI. I think corporates don't understand, or many of them don't understand, the power of what JCI as an organization could do if they were to partner with them. So that's been part of my eternal challenge in quest, really, is to get many companies to engage with JCI. And then I think for JCI members to also engage the leadership of their organizations to engage with the organization. So if you think of the global membership in JCI, how many people in the JCI membership work for quite big multinationals and companies who could make a huge impact by their partnering with JCI. And I think it's incumbent on us as JCI members and those who are passionate about it to try and get our leaders in our companies to engage with JCI as an organization. And I think that JCI can show companies like how to develop people, because I think it's got a totally different ethos, because you've got people who are hungry to develop and to grow themselves, and you've got access to, I'm going to say it now, because he was voted the best trainer in the world, this man here. You've got access to people, like you guys in an organization, and you don't find people like this in companies. It's quite rare.
Wayne, remember that we had like a time frame of 30 minutes. And
done.
we are exactly on the 30 minutes. So
Oh, yeah.
we are
Attention
very
span-
efficient and effective, because this was actually a very, very interesting conversation. And we got a lot of absolutely amazing points from you, Wayne. Thank you very much for
Pleasure.
having this time to think with us, because in a way, for Robbert and me, this is one of the rewards that we have, is to meet people like you and have a time to stop and think and to reflect and to get fantastic feedback from people like you, Wayne. So thank you very much. This was one more Let's Talk Business, organized by JCI European Senate. And Wayne, thank you very much once again, and see you next time.
See you guys.
Thank you.